Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So, in this video, we're going to look at some of the more recent polls that were released. As we know, Donald Trump has an astounding 46% plus lead in the national Republican primary. Ron DeSantis at the beginning of the year, was he giving him a run for his money? Well, a lot of people thought so. He was polling above 30% or so all the way into April. And since then, he has lost much of that support. A lot of it has crawled right directly back into the hands of Donald Trump, who's sitting there at almost 60%. In some of these head-to-head polls, he's getting close to 70%. And that's increasing as the days go by. Now, it is true that we don't have a national primary. Some states like Michigan will have Donald Trump polling close to 70%. Other states like Utah will have him down in the 30s, but he's still winning it. And probably by the time Utah rolls around, DeSantis will drop out or Trump will gain more momentum between now and then. So it's very likely that Donald Trump does not lose a single state. But we have to talk about the first state, because the first state is going to be voting in less than 2.5 months or so. I mean, we're knocking on the door of primary season, and the first state always tends to be Iowa. It's the Iowa Caucus this year, mid-January, and Donald Trump is ready. Ron DeSantis has basically moved to Iowa, and a lot of donors are moving away from him. They are abandoning his campaign because they realize it's been a disaster. It's been a failure. A lot of people may have parked their support for DeSantis, but then realized Trump still got it, or they realize that they're not really big fans of him. They watch him out there on the campaign trail. They realize he may not have that X factor. He might not have what it takes to go to the national level. You can win an election as a governor. You can be a governor, and people can prop you up, do whatever, but the national level is an entirely different ball game. And Ron DeSantis has shown us that he is not ready for prime time whatsoever, to the point where he is now in many polls falling to third place. I mean, nationally, we saw the Emerson poll. We covered that. That had him tied. But donors are shifting their support to Nikki Haley. You see Mike Pence dropping out. Where is his support exactly going to go? And you may say, well, people are going to drop out and coalesce behind a certain candidate. They probably will by like Super Tuesday, if DeSantis, or if they don't give up on their pipe dream of getting rid of Trump. Hint, not going to happen. In fact, the Super Tuesday states are going to be even less competitive. But nevertheless, it is true that you might see somebody like a Pence drop out, or maybe a Tim Scott drop out. Obviously, we already saw Pence, but Hutchinson, some of those other characters in the mix could eventually bow out of the race. But as of right now, it doesn't exactly seem as if there's going to be anybody dropping out immediately, even though we have a couple of months or so. You may see one or two drop out after Iowa, but we got to look at Iowa because that's what this video is about. And this is a state that's a red state now. It didn't used to be that way. It was actually a blue leading swing state, but thanks to none other than Donald Trump and largely the movement behind him and the Republican Party's turn, even if it's not fully there yet, to a more national populist type of worldview, well, Iowa is a red state now, and it should be. I mean, the state, you drive through it, it's basically indistinguishable from a Kansas, from a Nebraska. I don't know exactly what took so long, but nevertheless, we are here. And Trump is leading the Iowa aggregate by over 30 percentage points, and he is gaining in the state of Iowa. And you may say, well, that's less than nationally. Well, people need to understand that Iowa is a caucus, and the caucus demography tends to be a little bit more unfavorable to Trump, but he's still likely going to win it. You can look at 2016 and the caucuses there. Ted Cruz actually won the Iowa caucuses. It did not translate to an election victory for him. And even going back to 2012, Rick Santorum, he won the Iowa caucuses. He did not win the presidential election whatsoever, and that's typically how these things go. And 2008, John McCain got in fourth place in Iowa. He ended up winning the nomination. And the difference between then and now is that whoever wins Iowa is going to have to, have all the momentum going into the next caucus. And Donald Trump is up in New Hampshire. He's up everywhere. So if Trump underperforms a little bit in Iowa, it doesn't mean that he's not going to lose any sort of momentum whatsoever, but it just adds insult to injury that he has a big lead in Iowa, and that lead is expanding, and we see this in recent polling. 55% in the Iowa State poll, 51% in CBS, 46-15% in Fox Business. DeSantis has also been living in Iowa, basically. I mean, his approval's in Florida, kind of slipping in some polls that we've seen just because he's spending so much time outside the state. But even then, hasn't amounted to much. He's polling at 16% in the latest poll, the Seltzer poll. Which is funny because that's the poll that's usually dead on accurate for the presidential elections in terms of the general races and even the other statewide races that we've seen. But for primaries, they haven't always been accurate. They can be. It is an outlier, mind you. But if that's the final result and the other polls are overestimating Trump still has a very solid lead in the state of Iowa. And it shows that when you look within the poll, Trump is 12% of the second choice vote, and he also has 12% of the third or the fourth place vote. So if these other candidates drop out, Trump's share is only going to grow and increase. There's basically no way of taking out Trump, and that's in the state that's not really the most favorable to him because all the candidates have been spending months and months there. And then you look at polls for New Hampshire, DeSantis is in third place. South Carolina, DeSantis is in third place. Either way, it's not looking good for him. And Republicans are coalescing still behind none other than Donald Trump. And we've seen this. And his lead has expanded significantly from the start of the summer until now. It is true, DeSantis was polling at 28%. He basically moved there and lost support. I don't even know how that's possible. He announces he loses half of his support since his announcement. He's basically almost lost 2/3 of his support. In some polls, he's lost more than that since his announcement. How bad does your campaign have to be run? The whole argument is DeSantis is competent and he's the electable one, but the primary process has completely undone that narrative 1,000%. And donors are abandoning him. Some are even going back to Trump because they know there's no stopping him and they want to stop Biden. Others are flocking to people like Nikki Haley because they know that Haley's stock is rising, and she, even though I think she's insufferable personally, she makes waves in the debates, and the more debates go by, the more Haley's support is rising, even though I think her ceiling is much lower, and the polls show that her ceiling is much lower in this poll. Percentage of Republicans that would really even consider her is much lower than even DeSantis, but nevertheless, if you're looking at this and you're looking at this poll, what does it exactly show? It shows that overall Donald Trump is still rising in the state of Iowa. And even though that poll is a low outlier, you can compare that poll to the same poll in the past because the same poll in the past showed Trump at 42, DeSantis at 19, Haley at 6. So Haley's getting some undecideds, peeling off support from DeSantis. Trump is still gaining in that poll, but nevertheless, his lead is growing from 23 to 27%. So you're talking about a big finish in Iowa. You're talking about potentially a bigger finish in the state of New Hampshire. And then South Carolina, Haley is probably going to get in second place, and DeSantis will get a distant third, and Trump will get a distant first place finish there. Nevada, Trump, in the few polls that we've seen, is actually clearing everybody in the state of Nevada, to the point where if you look at this, in the last poll, Trump was at 52% of a lead. Not just that he's at 52%, he's at 65%. DeSantis is down there at 13%, and Trump's lead probably has increased since then. So you're looking at this right now, Trump is the favorite by far, not even close. The betting odds are also important because they used to show DeSantis in the lead. They did. Before the spring, DeSantis was the favorite in the betting odds. Yeah, Vegas isn't always accurate. We know that. But still, Trump then has completely flipped the script. He's at 72. DeSantis is down there at 8.5%. I don't know what these people are really waiting for. Trump should be in the 90s, and people will cope. They will cope relentlessly because they have to. They have to propagate their never Trump narrative. But it's going to be debunked in real time come January. It will be. Even if you say there's a slight underperformance, this poll ends up being the accurate pollster. Okay, fine. But still, taking that at face value, Donald Trump, even if you have a couple candidates drop out, is still going to have a convincing victory in the Iowa Caucus, a state he hasn't even spent that much time on, and all these other people are basically living there. They're spending, hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get rid of Trump. They've already spent a ridiculous amount of money. What has it amounted to? Absolutely nothing. This is one of the biggest failures that we've seen. I mean, that money could really go to something useful. It could go to, perfecting the Republican get out to vote operation to take on Joe Biden. Obviously, it could. But any dollar that's spent in any direction because of this nonsensical primary fight that has had zero shot, it's useless. It is. It's 100% useless. Trump is basically going to be the nominee. And the whole electability argument that they have to cling to, it's unraveling in real time because of how incompetent these people are. You think they're going to go on and take on Biden and win? DeSantis' favorables are lower than Donald Trump's. And some aggregates, his unfavorables, like on 538, are higher. The spread is higher than both Trump and Biden. How is this somebody who is a winner? How is this somebody who's going to go out there and take on Biden? Because as we see it right now, Trump is the guy, and Trump has a much greater shot at beating Biden than any of these people have at taking on Donald Trump. And if you disagree with that, I think you need to get your head examined, because it's just a massive, massive disaster for you if you really believe that these people have a shot. And even if for some reason Trump lost Iowa, he would still probably win every other state, but he's not going to lose Iowa. He's not. He's not slipping. Twitter's not real life. In fact, a lot of these people that support DeSantis have favorable ratings of Trump. The people that support Haley even tend to have favorable ratings of Trump, even if they don't really want him to be the nominee. A lot of them will still come around to him. They will still support him at the end of the day. And it's just going to be a massive waste of time that so many people, mainly these neocons, the donor class, they're just trying to launch the effort to take on Trump, but he's sitting there, he's riding high, 60%, possibly going to increase after the next disaster of a debate that we'll have to witness. But anyways, guys, that's enough for this video. Trump's up in Iowa. He's expanding his lead in every poll, even the polls that don't like him so much. He's got all the momentum, and voting, we're almost there. I mean, we have elections coming up next week that are very important, but also the Iowa Caucus 2024. Voting for that is going to be taking place in, I believe, 2.5 months or so. So we're knocking on the door of election season. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Red Eagle out.